Hi students, hope all of you are safe and fine by the grace of God. I am happy to teach this session for you. I thank God for giving me this opportunity. I am Soumya Shril, taking computer science on behalf of Mrs. T. Charles Velanganni. Let's begin. Lesson 1: Categories of computers and computer languages. The key concepts of this chapter are generations of computers, types of computers, computer language, working of a translator, and types of translator. Let's see the key concepts in detail. What is generation of computers? First of all, what is generation? Let's take your family for example. You have grandparents, parents, and you. The grandparents are the first generation, your parents are the second generation, and you are the third generation. Grandparents like to wear sari, your parents like to wear salwar, nowadays you like to wear jeans pant. So that is the advancement in culture. Likewise, computers also have generations based on their technological advancement. The first computer was a very large machine. It was almost the size of a room. It was that big in size. But nowadays you have slim laptops, palm tops, slim computers, etc. So that is the advancement from the first generation to this generation. So like size, speed, appearance, technologies, everything has been changed from one generation to the other up to date. All these changes are summed up together and is referred as generations of computers. Each generation has different technologies and different devices used for working of the system. There are 5 generations of computers: first, second, third, fourth, and the 5th generation of computers. As I said before, each generation used different technologies and devices. In today's class, we will see the first generation and the second generation of computers. The first generation of computers was in between 1940 to 1956. The dates are very important, please take a note of this. The characteristics of the first generation computers are: they used vacuum tubes. The vacuum tubes were used for calculating data in the first generation. You can see the picture of the vacuum tube in the next slide. They used punch cards for input and output devices. Nowadays we use keyboards and monitors as input and output devices, but in the first generation computers they used punch cards. They calculated data in milliseconds. Nowadays we calculate data in just a few part of a second, I would say. So they calculated data a bit faster, a bit slower than the nowadays computers. They were very large in size but had very small storage capacity. Even though they were as large as a room, their memory, their storage capacity was very small. The memory of the computer nowadays can load a lot of data and informations, because the memory of this age computer is very large. But in their computers, the first generation computers, had very very small storage capacity. They were slow in speed. In spite of their large size, their speed was very slow. The calculation of data was very slow. They consumed large amount of energy. This is a very big drawback of the first generation computers. Nowadays they do not consume a lot of energy, but in those days the first generation computers consumed a large amount of energy. Examples of first generation computers are ENIAC and UNIVAC. This is the first generation computers, and this is the vacuum tube. These computers were used in between 1940 to 1956, and this is the vacuum tubes they used for calculation of data. ENIAC. ENIAC is the short form of Electronic Numerator, Integrator and Computer. It was the first computer developed by J. Eckert and J. Moseley in the year 1946. This is the ENIAC machine. I have shown the picture of the ENIAC machine. And this is how they worked in ENIAC machine. UNIVAC. UNIVAC is the abbreviation of Universal Automatic Computer. It is the first commercially available computer developed by J. Eckert and J. Moseley in 1951. This is the UNIVAC machine. I have showed the picture here. You can see how they work in the UNIVAC machine. This was mainly used for commercial purpose. Let's see the second generation computers. This was in between 1951 to 1963. The characteristics of second generation computers are they used transistors instead of vacuum tubes. The first generation computers used vacuum tubes for calculation, but here in the second generation they used transistors. The second generation computers were smaller in size than the first generation computers. I have already told you that the first generation computers were as big as the room, but the second generation computers were smaller than the first generation. In the first generation computers, they used punch cards as input and output device, but here they use punch cards as well as magnetic tapes for input and output device. The first generation computers were slow in speed, but here in the second generation they were faster than the first generation computers. They could calculate data in microseconds. The second generation computers can calculate data and informations in microseconds, whereas in the first generation they calculated data in milliseconds. The first generation computers were costlier than the second generation, and they could be used only for specific purpose, but here they were used for various purposes. If you can tabulate the first and the second generation computers and write the differences between them, you can easily remember it. So you can also tabulate for easier studying. Example of second generation computers are IBM 1401, Honeywell 200 and RCA 501. Can you remember the examples of the first generation computers? Yes, they are ENIAC and UNIVAC. Here the examples are IBM 1401, Honeywell 200 and RCA 501. This is the transistor. The small picture here is the transistor, and the big picture here is the IBM 1401. This is how the IBM 1401 looked like. Yes, it is of course smaller than the first generation computer, isn't it? Yes, that's it for today's class. I am giving you a small homework. You should write the following questions and answers in your classwork note. If you do not have a classwork, you can use a rough note. The first question is, what is generation of computers? The answer: the changes and advancement in computer technology is summed up and is called as generation of computers. The second question: how many generations of computers are there and what are they? Answer: there are 5 generations of computers. They are the first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation, and the fifth generation of computers. Hope all of you are taking notes of this. What are the characteristics of the first generation computers? Answer: the characteristics of the first generation computers are: they used vacuum tubes, they used punch cards for input and output devices, they calculated data in milliseconds, they were very large in size but had very small storage capacity, they were slow in speed, they consumed large amount of energy. Example: ENIAC and UNIVAC. The fourth question: what are the characteristics of second generation computers? Answer: the characteristics of second generation computers are: they used transistors instead of vacuum tubes, they were smaller in size than the first generation computers, they used punch cards and magnetic tapes for input and output devices, they were faster and cheaper than the first generation computers, they could calculate data in microseconds, they were costly and could be used only for specific purposes. Example: IBM 1401, Honeywell 9000, and you can write any one of the example I've given in the previous slides. That's it for your homework. You should write it in your classwork or your rough note. Take picture of it and submit it in Google Classroom. So how should you enter the Google Classroom? Here is the code I've given you. You can write it down in your note or in a piece of paper. QI634EB is the code. Open Google Classroom. If you have an app, you can download Google Classroom app. So enter the Google Classroom. There will be a plus symbol shown here. You should click it and click join class. After joining the class will ask for a code, which I've already shown you in the slide. So enter the code and click join. After you join the class, this will be your home page. I've already given you an assignment, so click the assignment which is shown here. New assignment lesson 1. Click here. Next, this page will be shown. So you have to post your assignment here. Take a picture of your note in which you have written all the questions, and post it here and give turn in, and I'll be able to see your assignment. Thank you everyone. Hope you all enjoyed the class. Hope it was an interesting class. See you all in the next class. Have a nice day.